All right, 911 Systems here. I just want to give you guys a overview of the PCB layout. So if you need to make any adjustments or modify settings for your station alert controller, you kind of know where everything's at. The manual explains all this, but it's best, to show you. I feel like it's better when something is explained than trying to read it in the manual. So we're going to start off with the outputs, which are 5 amp relays. There's 8 of them. And each relay corresponds to the K1 through K8 output. So K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it's important to know that the left side, by default, is going to be programmed, or jumper is going to be set so the left side is your hot, the right side is your ground. Now, if you change the jumpers, you can see here, if you change these jumpers, say you need it to be a dry contact, you would remove the shunt off of C and D, and you would put the shunt to A. So you would move this shunt over like this, right? You'd put that on A, and you would take this shunt off just by lifting it up and getting rid of it there. So you should just have the pins with no shunt. So now it's a dry contact relay. So now you can run your own device into this, and it would activate based on what the programming is. So let's put this back to how it was. And keep moving on with this tutorial here. So that's how you move the shunts around. You can see the A and B and the C and D, and then these are where the shunt should be. So 1 indicates the shunt would be on it. So it's it's pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, I can't talk today. I think I said that right. It's self-explanatory. Explanatory? Who knows? I'm not an English major. Moving right along, we're going to look at some of the other jumpers that change settings on here, and then we're going to look at the volume pots. So you can see this guy here, which says PA-PTT. Not everybody will use this, but this can control your audio amplifier. That's your audio signal, your PA output that goes into your speakers. This can turn your amplifier on and off when there's a transmission. That way you don't hear like the dry audio noise, if that makes sense, or the like the audio buzz from your speakers. So that's something that's completely up to you. Moving along to the other jumpers, you can see there's a voice detect jumper here. And this unit can detect voice, so you have an option between if it detects an audio signal and activates, if you have that turned on in the settings, through the radio port, which is the DE9 port here, or the audio DE9 port and audio input jack are linked, so they're parallel. They run in parallel, so you can either run it in from a scanner or a radio into this port if you want. For voice detect, or you can have it set for the DIN port, which is the circular 5-pin DIN, which is the pager connection, is what most people recognize that as in the fire and EMS service. So we do have it set to the DIN for voice detect, and that can be hooked to a weather radio. It could be hooked to other audio devices that only make an alert or noise when there's a reason to set the alert system off. And then you can say, well, if voice is detected, then turn on relays 1, 2, and 3 and play MP3 file 44, which might be like, fire units respond. There is a audio chart available as well that will show you what all the audio files are, but let me not get into that with this video. So next you're going to see up here, you're going to see input 3 and input 4. So what this is, this links input 3, which is this pin, the bottom left pin here, input 3, and then the third over, input 4, to pins 8 and pins 9. And what this is for like P25 call alert, where your radio can ground out a pin, the VIP pin, like the vehicle interface port, I believe is what it's called. They have like VIP 1 and 2 on Motorola radios. You can actually program your radio so on call alert that it will trigger an alert, and then the controller will actually take that as an alert activation, activate the alert however you have it set to alert, whatever relays you want to come on, whatever audio files play, the audio comes on and out to your PA speakers, blah, 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 blah. And then it can also TX on the radio to clear the push to talk, or I'm sorry, clear the alert by keying up the radio, just like you would key up the radio or push the talk button to clear the call alert off your radio in those instances. So if you're not using P25 call alert, especially if you're using a Maxon radio, the SD171, SD125 radio that comes with our UHF, VHF kits, you want to keep this in the right position, the B position or the off position. You don't want to put that in input 3 or input 4 unless you're using these pins, because there can be some interference for any other radios that are connected. Now moving along to the volume pots. So this can get a little confusing. So I kind of just want to like give you the real like the easy way to understand it. So these control the volume levels in a particular state. So your radio is usually off, or it may be in monitor mode. So there is a port here, the second from the left, or I'm sorry, the second from the right here. That port there is a monitor input. So if you send the ground signal into that, and right next to it is a ground. So if you wanted to hook up a switch, like a flip switch or a push button switch that would push on, you could run ground into one side of that switch, and then the return when the switch is on would come back into the second from the right top port there. And when you send that ground signal in, it puts it in monitor mode. Well, maybe when you have it in monitor mode, or what some people call day mode, where you can listen to the radio traffic, you might not want to have the volume too loud. You might want it to be quieter than, say, if there was an alert, which would be PA, which we'll talk about in a second. So if you're using a pager to monitor, then this would be your pager monitor. So any audio coming in here is considered pager audio, and this would be at the monitor level. So you could turn that down just like you were turning monitor down for the radio. So I know the wording is not perfect on these because we had a change of idea as far as how the audio was switched kind of midway through designing this, and we just kind of kept the labeling the same so it wouldn't be too confusing when it comes to like manuals and stuff like that. So your pager audio controls the monitor level of the DIN port. Monitor audio level is for the radio and the input here. So whichever one you have audio coming in, you can't use both at the same time. So if you have a scanner connected here or a radio connected to the audio input, or if the audio is coming directly from the accessory port on the back of the radio, the monitor controls the monitor level when the monitor switch is turned on and connected into that ground port. Your PA level is whenever there's an alert, either from the DIN port or from the DE9, which is the radio port, or this guy here, this port here, if there's an alert that's triggered by two-tone detect, DTMF, single tone, whatever the case may be, once there's a trigger, even if you press an input that's set to make a trigger, the audio switches over to your PA. And obviously you want to turn this one up a little bit. That way, when there's an alert, the audio is distinctly louder than your radio monitor or your pager monitor, and you can hear the call. Now, going up here to radio response. Radio response is when you transpond. So transponding is if you transmit a message back out of the connected radio when you receive an alert. 99% of the people using this are not using this to transpond, but it is a nice feature to have. One example would be if you had an emergency button on your front ramp and there's not always someone at the firehouse, you could program, input 4, input 3, or whatever input you want, and you could put an emergency button on the front ramp. And when you press that button, the radio will transpond or send a pre-recorded message that's on this micro SD card out over the radio system, so a dispatcher or other people monitoring your dispatch channel can hear the emergency at your firehouse. So this just controls the level of the volume that goes out, that's transmitted out on the radio. So this is usually left here or turned up a little bit. MP3 level, this is the alert audio or the voice prompts that you would hear through your speaker system when there is an alert or a button press or some sort of notification, either a pager activation, two-tone, DTMF, single tone is detected. and there's an alert set up for that, and it goes to live PA. So anything that's, the MP3 is going to play your alert audio out through your not live PA, but your PA output. So your PA output would play, and your MP3 level can be a different level than all your other levels. So this could be cranked up even louder than, say, your alert audio level when there's a call. So your radio audio level after there's a call or a dispatch. That way you get a really loud alert, you get loud audio, and then after your time expires for live PA, there's live PA now that we're talking about that, the live PA timer would expire and it would go back into the monitor state if you're in monitor mode at a lower level, or the system would shut off completely. So that's kind of what you have to adjust in here. If you notice the system's just not working right for some reason, you can press this reset button, but pressing this when it's inside of the case is kind of counterintuitive because there's no access to it. You can just unplug the controller at that point and plug it back in to do a reset. So moving over to the SD card, this is a 1 gigabyte 911 Systems SD card. It comes preloaded with over 100 audio files, alert audios, and text. And of course, I slid that under the latch back. Let me look and see what I'm doing here. So that just clicks in. And you can load your own audio files on this. Just be mindful that you should keep them short, because the longer the audio plays, the more of the call dispatch you may miss. Just doing another once over on everything. You have your radio connection port, audio input, which runs in parallel to these two ports, run in parallel. So your 3.5 millimeter and the audio port, the audio pin on here run together. So you can connect one or the other. You have a second audio channel here on pin 1, which is this top right pin, and then the ground is the shielding, or the shield around. So audio and then audio ground. And then the bottom port here, 3, is your trigger port. So if it gets a ground signal, it'll actually can be your 5th input, or it lets them know a pager is activated. So you can hook a weather radio or anything that has a relay to it, and you can get an activation off that, which can be set up completely different to activate something completely different than any other two-tone, DTMF, anything like that. Here you have your inputs, your monitor switch, your push-to-talk, or your PA trigger to turn on your PA amplifier when there's transmissions, and then you have a bunch of grounds. And the idea of having the grounds on here, so it's basically input 1, ground, input 2, ground, monitor, ground, input 3, ground, input 4, ground, and then your two PA push to talk triggers, or switches rather. So the idea is you'd be able to run a 2-conductor cable to a button, your ground on one side, which would be the second from the left here, and then your signal for input 1 would come back from that button, and that would be a momentary push button. So you press it, it activates the system, you'll see the light come on over here, so on and so forth. The USB ports the USB port is for programming. It's the only thing it does. You can't use it for monitoring or anything else like that. It's simply for running programming, changing programming, and changing audio files that play. You can't change the physical audio file because they're on this micro SD card. You'd have to pull this card out, put it in a card reader, and you could load your own audio files. There are instructions on how to do that. Just be mindful that your audio files have to be numbered from 001 to 255, and we use about 110 spots. So you can use any spot that isn't assigned between 001 and 255 for your audio files. Moving back around here to this side, just to give you a quick look at this without it being in the case, you have your lights here, and these lights indicate K1, K2, K3, K4, and then K5, 6, 7, and 8. So it's, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and then this is your power input. So this is a 12-volt input, or you can use the supplied power supply, which is 5 amps. So the board can support 12 amps. So if you have like a 12-volt, 12-amp power supply, or even a bigger power supply, because if you're connecting this using a radio, you want to keep this board and your public safety radio or whatever radio you're using on the same power supply if at all possible, to minimize ground loop problems and whatnot. So that's a look at the PCB. Now this PCB does slide into this case here, and this is actually going to be a second video that we're going to show you how everything hooks up on the external of the unit. Thanks for watching.